Hello and welcome to Take Me Home, the podcast offering a social democratic alternative for the politically homeless. I'm Hilary and Salt.
And I'm Sebastian Moore.
And we are joined in the studio today by Macvarish, who is the Events and Education Director at the Free Speech Union. Welcome to Manchester, Jan.
Thanks, Hilary. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Sebastian.
I always like doing in-person interviews, much more than online. I find it much better. But the problem with that is we do have a quite epoxy office.
So we sort of
smuggled you in through the door and then put the thing here.
I'm happy to sit on laps. Yeah. It's fine.
It's compact, not poxy.
Cosy,
Petit and bijou. Compact and bijou.
Yes.
Thank you. So tell us why you're in Manchester.
Well, I was up here last night for an event that the FSU organised in association with the Women's Rights Network, Manchester, North West region. And that was an event exploring free speech and equality law with an incredible speaker, Aqua Reindorf, KC, who is kind of the authority really on equality legislation and has looked into what's going on in the universities and then also employment tribunals. And so she's been a really important voice on the sex-gender issue and sort of guiding people through the law around the difference between sex and gender and where biological sex should sit in the law. So she was in conversation with Joe Bartosh last night, and we had an audience of about 130, I think. Packed room, sold out really quickly, and it was just a great opportunity to explore the law, really, and how it can protect free speech and how it's been misapplied or misunderstood.
Aqua Reindorf was fantastic, wasn't she? She's a towering person on this, isn't she?
Yes. And the audience was great. I mean, I thought the audience was incredibly well informed. So it was really, really a great event.
And in case anybody thinks that feels a bit dry, there was quite a few moments of humour as well, wasn't there?
Yeah. Well, because it's a lived issue. I mean, people are directly encountering this stuff and the misuse of law.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is there? I've never been to a Free Speech Union event. I should go. Is there a good understanding amongst the audience and everybody there of how to conduct yourselves in terms of, your opinion can be voiced, but in a respectable manner? Like, was there a Q&A at this event
Always.
last night?
We always have a really long Q&A. So I've always hated the kind of events that you go to with a sort of celebrity speaker and, 10 minutes is given for Q&A and, you're strictly told you must only ask a very short question and that's it. You're kind of put back in your box again. And I've always really hated being in the audience at those events. So we give over half the time to audience Q&A. And I think nowadays, on the kind of issues we discuss, the audience have their expertise. So on this issue last night, there are people who have been really thinking their way through this issue, and as they've encountered it, they've been reporting it back and sharing the experiences, and that's on the sex gender issue. But the last meeting we did up here was on football and how for example, fan speech is being policed more and more, and how various bits of legislation may well affect the kind of atmosphere in the ground as well. So people have experience of that. So that's what you get in the audience, which I think is invaluable. And the speakers always really, really like that. So it's never a problem with conduct. I have to say, I've never kicked anybody out. I would if they were stopping anybody else's. Well, if they were stopping anybody else's speech, and if I thought in advance that somebody may not behave themselves to such that they will interrupt the proceedings, then I wouldn't let them in. But I think that's completely reasonable. It's not incompatible with free speech. It actually allows it to happen.
Have you got any other events coming up that you want to let people know about?
Well, we're just reaching a whole kind of stretch of them, at the end of a stretch of them. So our next one is actually in Dundee. So we're going to Dundee for the first time.
Okay.
And there we're talking about human rights and free speech. And then after that, I've got a lot of planning to do to get the next sort of section of events up and running.
And if people just go to the FSU website and look for events, they can find...
we've got an events page with a full kind of calendar where people can go through. And it's worth looking back at what we've done in the past as well, just to get a flavour. So if there's nothing new coming up, look at what we have done and you'll get a sense of the kind of things we do. And all of our events are filmed. And then they go up either on our YouTube channel, which is available to everybody, or we paywall them just for members.
Yeah.
And that's on our website as well in the videos section.
Great.
And how long has the Free Speech Union been going?
5 years. So we celebrated our 5th anniversary this spring. We started in March 2020. I joined in the September of that year as a member of staff. And it was set up to do exactly what it's gone on to do, which is to challenge cancel culture and to do it in multiple ways. So to do it by representing our members. So it's a membership organisation, and it always has been. And that's partly why we call it a union. So even though it's not, as a legal entity, it's not a trade union, it's a non-profit, it nevertheless operates in a way that trade unions would have done, which is to represent the interests of their members, but just with a particular focus on speech rights. So that's the bulk of what we do. We've got a big case team that's growing, feels like it's growing weekly, because we've got 30,000 members now and a huge caseload. And we've represented, I think, over 3,500 of them since we started. So the kind of casework is the backbone of what we do, and it's unique because nobody else does that. And that could be everything from offering some advice in advance of a problem occurring. It can be sending a letter on somebody's behalf to an organisation, their employer, just kind of reminding the institution of the law and of the rights of that person. Or it can start to get heavier, and we can go all the way up to representing people in criminal cases or judicial review, so all the way up through the legal system. But then we also do, I was thinking about in advance of this, all of the things we do. So there's the kind of everyday casework, which will be, I meet people all the time in events, which is so nice. People come up to me and say, oh, you're helping me at the moment. And I say, well, it's not me, it's our case team. And I haven't necessarily heard about their case. But that can be everything from a cleaner, that one of my colleagues told me about, a woman who was working as a cleaner, and she went into a conversation with somebody who was offering her a rainbow lanyard. And the cleaner started saying, well, I'm not really sure about this. My brother's gay. I'm, obviously completely on side with gay rights. I don't really like the progress colours, the progress flag. And for that, she was sacked. And we managed to win her, I think, something like £10,000 as compensation for unfair dismissal. Those kind of ordinary cases, which you'll never get reported in the press, really, because the person just wants to get on with their lives. Another one, which is currently ongoing, so I won't be specific about it, but of the kind of situations you imagine occurring. As a woman who had worked somewhere for 33 years and challenged a trans person in her workplace lavatories. So a man came in and started using the ladies' loos in the workplace, and she didn't challenge that person directly. She went to management and said, look, is this really what is supposed to be going on? For that, she was sacked. And these kind of cases, people wouldn't believe you, I think, a lot of the time if you told them, and people are treated really, really badly, and they're treated illegally. And so when we get involved, we can really push back, and we're fairly confident that the law is on the side of those people, and that we can, if not get them reinstated, which they don't always want to go back to that workplace because they've been treated so abysmally, but at least we can get them compensation and clear their name so that they can then go on to another job, hopefully, somewhere else, which is more reasonable.
Yeah, it sounds far-fetched, doesn't it? Like, if you told people that, I can imagine people saying, nah, that didn't happen.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yes, except that the thing I always think is that everybody knows what they're not allowed to say. So those people that we represent are the people that have either decided to speak out because they know it's wrong and they know that it's important to be the person who says, no, I'm not going to, we shouldn't be putting up with this. Or I think it's all right to ask a question. I mean, very often people are just asking a reasonable question and they have been disciplined or sacked for that. I think it is hard to believe, except that anybody who's part of an institution or in a workplace knows that this is going on, because they're holding back from asking those difficult questions, and they're just kind of thinking, well, I don't think I want to be the person who asks the question. But some people are the person that asks the question, and those are the people that we end up representing, and they're really important people. Because they are, I find them heroic, I have to say. I find them really heroic because it's that person. It's like the Emperor's New Clothes. You're the kid who says, you're naked.
And is this across all spectrums of employment? Or is it a public service thing? Is it an academia thing? Or is it just everywhere?
No, I mean, I think to start with, I think we were very focused on cancel culture in terms of kind of online mobbings. So it was when the social media companies were kicking people off social media because other people had complained about them. And so that was kind of a focus when we first started. So obviously not an employment kind of issue. And then higher education, obviously no platformings, that kind of thing was very much in our sights. But then obviously once we started putting the call out and saying, look, we're here and we will help you, just this flood of employment cases came in. And I think without us, I don't think people would know this was happening.
Yeah.
Because individual people, there is nowhere you can go to. Your trade union is very, very unlikely to help you.
Why is that? Why is it not? Because you'd imagine that's the job of the trade unions, is to defend workers in the workplace, wouldn't you?
Because they don't agree with the opinions very often that those workers are expressing. So trade unions are very often now, well, maybe it's been like this for a long time, they've got the same ideas as the management class. They're a part of management in many ways. And they've got the same ideas and values, woke if you want to call them that. They are the ones, encouraging people to attend the local pride parade or, wear the lanyard, all of that kind of thing. This stuff is coming from the unions very often. So, and it highly politicising the workplace, whether that's, Israel, Gaza or whatever it is. It's the union activists who are taking the stuff forwards. And so they can't be relied upon to represent workers who don't agree.
I quite like that new phrase, the lanyard class. Have you heard that?
Yeah, I think it's great. It's very helpful, isn't it?
Yeah. So you've talked about some of the kind of ordinary, everyday cases that you're involved in. There's obviously, people might know the FSU from some of the really big cases, Lucy Connelly, things like that. Are they kind of equally part of the time commitment that you have, or do you spend more time on the everyday cases than the big cases?
Well, I think probably the way it works, and I think I'm right on this, which is our kind of in-house case team, who are not lawyers, will handle a lot of the casework, and then they'll outsource it to solicitors and barristers as necessary.
Yeah.
So say we're going through an employment tribunal, our caseworkers can't work with the person through the tribunal. We'll have to have external expertise, but we'll do as much of the case management as we can to kind of save money and to manage that in-house. Once you get to the more complicated, especially the criminal cases, like Lucy Connelly or Jamie Michael, another case which I can talk about, then it's barristers, and that's obviously going to be outsourced. But we have our own legal counsel, kind of the heavier legal end of things, I suppose, with it in-house as well, who will also do as much of the work as we possibly can with the support of external legal professionals as well, some of which is pro bono, sometimes it's mates rates, and other times it's full price, I'm sure. Expensive work.
Yes, yeah. And do you have one of the things that Aqua Rindorf said last night at the FSU WRN event was that she had faith in the courts to get it right. And I think that's a faith that perhaps many people wouldn't share. What's your view?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I don't like the kind of, everything's already broken. I find that, I mean, what on earth are we here for if we think everything's already broken? You wouldn't be a political party if you thought that Westminster was completely broken and there was no way of, living in a civilised society, basically. It clearly isn't broken. Nevertheless, obviously the law can be challenged as you go through all the steps. I suppose if you're totally sort of immersed in law, you can see how it works. So what Accra was arguing was that the thing about the law is it is logical, it is rational, and it's kind of historic. There's a weight to the decision making. It can't just run away with itself. Yeah. So it's less prone to ideological capture than other areas of life. And I think there's a lot in that, which is why I think the law has been incredibly important in the last few years in the case of the Supreme Court judgment on women's rights versus trans rights, it is about sort of getting down to the fundamentals of what is a woman. That's where that was discussed, which sounded ludicrous, and everybody was going, well, I know what a woman is, and we all do. But nevertheless, the law has to have a definition, and what they did was clarify what the definition was in law. So there's something foundational about law, which I think is really important. Akira's point is that law is after the fact. So it reflects society. It's not that law necessarily shapes society, but it can sort of act as a bit of a brake on the wackier end of things, I think. So while I wouldn't necessarily want to kind of over-rely on judges to tell us what to think and where to go next, nevertheless, I can see why she thinks that the legal system and the judiciary kind of work, because the way in which they work, the process of thinking and balances that they have to go through and analysis is one that it's fortunately quite difficult to undo. And that's probably a really good thing. Well, it is a very good thing.
Yeah.
Do you ever get emotionally invested in the particular cases? Like, I'm thinking of Lucy Connelly. I can find myself getting really mad at what I see as the injustice of it. If you're closer to it, do you find yourself getting emotionally engaged?
Well, I don't deal with the casework, and I think I know for a fact I would. And there's certain cases that really get me. And funnily enough, one of the ones that really got me, and that was just from hearing about it as we were considering whether to take it on, was the case of the young woman who was a football player, who had challenged the presence of a man in supposedly a women's team that she was supposed to be about to play against. And for asking the question, is he a man, are you a man, she was suspended from playing any matches for, I think, 6 or 7 matches. And she had to play those matches in order to get her sports qualification. And she was only 17. And she was put through a disciplinary process by the FA. And when I heard about that, I was just so outraged, because women have to be able, everybody has to be able to ask those basic questions to know that they're safe, that their ankles are not going to get broken by somebody who is, of considerable bigger body mass and strength than them. They have to be able to ask those questions in the same way you have to be able to say, when you're in a changing room or in a sports centre or anything like, hang on, is it really the case that man can be here? You've got to be able to say that. And so the fact that she was punished for that, I found that, I don't know why, I found that incredibly, I've still now my eyes go, I just find it incredibly affecting, because that idea that you would not be able to sort of speak on your instincts, I suppose. Lucy Connelly, I went to the court for her hearing the other week for part of the afternoon of the hearing. And, when you see, for all, thinking that, yes, the law is very good and it upholds some very, very important principles by which society operates. When you're in a courtroom, and Lucy was in prison at the time, she didn't come to the court, so she was down the line on a screen, and sort of seeing her there in this kind of court where murderers have been and terrorists have been, and her husband sitting next to us, and you see these 3 judges weighing up her case for essentially a speech act. There's nothing more to what she did other than a speech act. She wrote a tweet, which she then took down 3 hours later. And no matter what you think of the tweet, at the end of the day, it was only up there for 3 hours. And she could not have known. I don't think it did cause the outcome that it's been blamed for, but at the same time, she couldn't have known that. There had no riots had started when she wrote that. It was basically the early evening when we'd only just started to hear about what had happened to the little girls in Southport. So the idea that you're not allowed to be furious and kind of almost irrationally furious in response to something so appalling as what was coming through as a massacre of little girls. The idea that you'd be more worried by people being angry at that than anything else is just unbelievable. So I think those kinds of cases, I'm so glad that we exist and we can get involved and that we can kind of bring a cool head to it and sort of see through the politics of it and bring the best of the law to it. I mean, obviously it can be very frustrating. She didn't win her appeal against her sentence, so she's still in prison.
And there's a few areas where the FSU is kind of lobbying on forthcoming legislation, isn't there? Do you want to say a bit about that?
Yes. Well, the big one that we have been, it's amazing how slow this stuff is. So since the setting up of the FSU, we have been pushing for the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act. Well, it was a bill. And there was much toing and froing in Parliament about that. I think very successfully in putting that on the statute books, it's made everybody have to accept that there is a major problem in higher education for when it comes to academic freedom and freedom of speech. So whereas when we started, people were sort of denying that there was a problem, it's a culture wars, it's the right wing, it's kind of, whereas it just became undeniable. Yeah. So I think there's a lot to be said for the act of campaigning for legislation, because it provides this brilliant focus where people have to evidence it, and then you end up with evidence of the problem. So I think that was really good. Obviously the bill was passed eventually after much tweaking, and then as soon as Labour came into power, literally within a week, they sort of tried to quietly sort of shelve it and say we're going to suspend it and not enact it. And we then threatened them with a judicial review, which to have the resources to be able to do that is absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. Because who else could do that? And so we, held their feet to the fire basically. So now I think I think it comes back again in July. But it looks as though not Rachel Reeves, who's the Education Secretary? Bridget Phillipson. Bridget Phillipson will have to enact it and probably try and trim a few things off. But, I think without us, I don't think it would have be in existence. So that's great. And when Akua last night was talking about higher education, she was saying that while she has quite a lot of faith in the law and the judiciary, academia, not so much. And the universities really are in a terrible state when it comes to freedom of speech and kind of what lots of people talk about as ideological capture.
Yeah, yeah.
We spoke about that in our very first podcast episode. Do you remember?
We did, yeah.
Episode number 1.
Yeah, yeah.
And for anybody that doesn't know, this is a bill that would encourage or ensure that universities uphold students' right to freedom of speech.
Well, and academics. Students
right.
and academics. And so it would make them have a proactive obligation to cultivate free speech and academic freedom on campus. But also that it meant that those who suffered a detriment could actually sue the institution, which we thought was really important. Some people didn't like the idea of that. I know the government, that was one of the things they tried to get rid of. But we think that's really important because there have been so many cases of academics who have suffered shockingly, absolutely shockingly. Well, obviously the one that everybody knows about is Kathleen Stock at the University of Sussex. But there's many, many others some of whom people will never have heard of and won't hear of because they've just been kind of driven out. Yeah. And it's extraordinary and terrible culture that's been created.
And the banter bill you've been talking about as well, haven't you?
So this is the Employment Rights Bill, which so now Toby Young, who set up the Free Speech Union, is now Lord Young, and he is so obviously in the House of Lords. It's great in lots of ways because it means that he can actually speak on issues, and with that comes some clarity, but also join together with other lords and ladies, whatever, other lords and ladies, and baronesses, yes, I think he's sorry, and to press for legislation, so or to oppose legislation. So in this case, it's the other way around. So rather than proposing legislation, we're opposing. I think it's Section 20 of the Employment Rights Bill, which will make employers liable for what's called harassment that their employees might experience while at work. And the definition of harassment there is so broad that now would include overhearing conversations. So that's why we're calling it the banter ban, because in a pub or in a wherever football ground, if a member of the bar staff overheard a conversation that they found offensive, they could potentially sue the employer for making it possible for them to hear it. Now you can imagine that in a pub, and it's already happening. So there's a couple of instances which I've seen where people in pubs have been refused service because individual members of staff object to who they are, what they're wearing on a T-shirt, what they think they're saying, who they think they are. And in any other way, that would be discriminatory, and people would absolutely condemn it. If somebody was condemned, was discriminated against because they were Rastafarian, everybody would know that was wrong. But if you're a woman wearing a I am an adult human female t-shirt and you refuse service, well, that's discrimination. But there've been these cases where staff have taken it upon themselves to police what people can say and who can be served. And so and you can see how, from an employer point of view, if they know they've got employees like that, they may well become incredibly risk averse and just then try to really dampen down the culture that really should be the culture of a pub.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your PR team is good, because if you say we're opposing Section 20 of the Employment Rights Bill, people are like, we're opposing the banter ban.
Yes.
Love that.
Yeah. I know. Well, they had an event recently near Westminster, which was they took over a pub and they had banter bouncers in high-vis jackets. They produced special beer mats, say no to the banter ban. And they had Intel Lady, the comedian who does very good impressions of Angela Rayner. She came down and told everybody off. So, yes, we have got a very talented kind of legislative affairs team and PR, And you need to do that. You need to kind of turn things into something that people can really understand and get their teeth into.
Absolutely.
You were going to, I think, talk about the case of Jamie Michael. You said you would come back to it. Is that right?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting case. So he was, is a guy from Wales who, after the Southport massacre, broadcast to Facebook, his Facebook followers. And I watched the video. He's kind of walking through the Welsh countryside and he's saying to people, we can't let more of this happen. We're going to have to do something. And what he says people have to do is to get involved in politics, basically, at a local level. He says, you're going to have to go down to your council meetings. We're going to have to go to the schools. We're going to have to get involved and make your voices heard. And he was then, because of this video, he was then arrested. And I can't remember what the actual charge was, but it was rather like Lucy Connelly, but locked up. Like his people are kind of, taken into custody. Anyway, we managed to get that dropped. So he went before a jury trial, because a lot of people pleaded guilty. So like Lucy Connelly, she pleaded guilty and then was convicted very, very fast. And so then we couldn't challenge her conviction. We could only challenge her sentence. With Jamie Michaels, he didn't plead guilty. And so we were able to get involved then. And he went before a jury, and I think it was a 12-minute trial. The jury just found him not guilty in 12 minutes.
Well done, jury.
Yeah, absolutely. And
so why might someone plead guilty in that situation?
Oh, Sebastian, we've done this on the podcast.
Have we? I've got a bad memory though,
Do you know, I explained that because there's big delays in getting cases to trial. If you don't plead guilty, you're often held on bail for a long
court case
period.
backlog.
Yeah,
I remember.
Yeah. So we've done that.
Yeah, but also after the riots, there was, conversely, very, very quick processing.
Yeah.
So after the 2011 riots, they brought in these 24-hour courts, and there was a kind of real emphasis on getting convictions very, very fast. So people were being convicted within a week or so.
Yeah.
Because I think Lucy Connelly was convicted in the August, I think, and the riots happened in July.
Yes.
So very, very fast.
Yeah.
But she was hoping to be out by Christmas.
Yeah.
That's what she thought would happen. And so, because our argument in her appeal was that she didn't fully understand the seriousness of what she was accepting her guilt for, because there's different levels to the conviction, and she pleaded guilty to what she thought was kind of a racial hate speech offence or whatever, I would know what it's called, racial incitement. Yeah. But there's an additional element to that, which is incitement to serious violence. Now, we claimed that she didn't really fully understand that was a much more serious charge to accept, and so that's why she ended up with a 31-month sentence. So that's why we're appealing.
So I think I'm just conscious of time, Sebastian. One more question. Go on.
Yeah, allow me one more. Has the way that you think about free speech changed since you've been involved with the Free Speech Union? In your daily life, when you're getting into conversations, have you been in any situation where you think, do you know what, I am going to speak up because you've been thinking about this more?
I think Hilary will know that nothing's changed. No, I was always
You've always been like that.
I was always a free speech, as close to absolutist as you can get. I I feel that free speech is our responsibility. It's an obligation. If you're part of a democracy, you have to speak. And who else is going to do it? If you don't do it as an individual, then who does it on your behalf? And similarly, I refuse to be protected from ideas. I just can't understand why that would be the case. I don't necessarily want to witness every idea, every kind of revolting film and every, death metal song ever. I can choose what I expose myself to, but I don't want anybody else making that choice for me. So to me, it's always been really clear. I think what's changed with the Free Speech Union is really realising the role of law.
Yeah.
I think might be much more of the kind of, what we need is a cultural shift. And I think what you can see with what we've done is you can do the two together, and what law does is it really focuses the arguments, focuses attention, shows you where the problems are, and when you because law, you end up with a very clear outcome, which if you just call for a culture change, you never know when you've reached it, and you don't really have a concrete rallying point for people where you can see people really respond to these court cases of individual people, and in the process of that, people become incredibly well informed. And at the moment, there's a growing number of people who are very, very well informed. They know all about these cases, partly because of our newsletter, which goes out every Friday.
Good plug there.
Yeah, I know.
And your podcast.
I'm also good.
Yeah.
But I know social media, but also this is now becoming something that the press are talking about, which they weren't. So there's a big piece in the Mail today, I think, about Quran burning. The two-headed debate about Quran burning.
Yeah.
And that's because we've taken up the case of a chap who burnt a Quran outside the Turkish embassy, we should get a judgment on Monday, I think.
Okay. I am going to move us on, if that's okay, to Culture Club.
Oh, we're doing Culture Club.
Yeah,
Sorry, I was getting so immersed in the conversation, I completely forgot about Culture Club.
Yeah. So, shall I go first? And I wanted to talk about music festivals. Mm-hmm. So I'm just back from Bearded Theory with my requisite little armband.
How long is that going to stay on for?
I should probably take it off next week. And in the previous place that I worked, you'd have people who by the end of summer might have 6 or 7 of these on their arms, getting more and more ragged. So there's actually hundreds of music festivals happening in the UK, across the UK. Probably some that you've heard of. Glastonbury.
I've heard of Glastonbury.
Yeah.
I'm really uncultured when it comes to this sort of stuff. Hilary's always laughing at me.
How many people didn't go to Glastonbury?
200,000.
Yeah, but that's about right, yeah. Well done.
I went there in the late 80s,
well.
before there were any police on site.
Yeah.
That was frightening. On the one hand, it was very free. On the other hand, it was just completely overrun with drug dealers. So didn't happen for 2 years, I think, or 3 years, and then they brought it back. They did actually have police on site.
Yeah, I mean that idea of it being a kind of place of excess, I think. Certainly Leeds and Reading are kind of rites of passage, I think, for every young person that's the first festival they go to where they behave badly, I'm sure.
I've been to both Leeds and Reading, but not the festivals.
No. I kind of think it probably wouldn't be your thing, if I'm honest.
Why not?
Well, because it is just people behaving quite badly.
Because I'd prefer to sit down with a cup of tea and a book.
Yeah, exactly.
You might have cider spilt on you from a big plastic glass. I have to say, I don't like any of that stuff. I like a hotel. Well, cotton sheets.
Yeah, Bearded Theory is quite a nice small festival, so about 10,000 people. 4 main stages, a couple of smaller stages, and very much enjoyed it. Really enjoyed Public Service Broadcasting, the band. You've probably never heard of them. Saw some new bands I hadn't seen before, the Lovely Eggs. They're not a new band, but they're new to me. And had a thoroughly good time. And actually the weather was okay. I think one of the things about festivals for people that attend them is that you always love relaying the horror stories. So I was at festival number 6 in North Wales when 3 storms met over the festival site of the weekend, and all the cars floated away. And
normal for Wales.
And many tents, yeah. Yeah.
We're sponsoring a festival,
Are you?
a Democra Fest at the end of August.
Oh,
There's,
I think
we are as well.
Oh yes, I think William's speaking,
Yeah.
isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, we're doing our own tent, FSU tent.
Right, that's the sort of festival I can get behind.
Yeah,
We
Democra
can come to
Fest.
that. We're doing it for a younger audience, so you can come.
Yeah.
Hilary can't.
I'll be there.
Will there be cider?
The Hosiers are playing.
Okay.
I've heard of them.
Right, no, I don't know them. No.
Oh,
don't know
I'd heard of the Hosiers.
I know who it is, yeah.
okay,
That's
yeah.
from when I was young.
Yeah,
Oh,
years
right,
back.
okay.
And a few other
Yeah.
bands, but
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
kind of a mixture of talks and politics, and we're doing our own tent, which is going to focus kind of on very much younger people who have been cancelled and some of the taboo topics.
Superb.
So yeah, that should be really good.
Yeah. We'll put a link in the show notes to
Yeah,
that
August
festival.
30th it's taking
Yeah,
place in a
great.
field.
Do you had something for Culture Club as well, Jan?
Yeah, well, you said I couldn't talk about Yellowstone, so
We've already done Yellowstone, I'm afraid.
which is
Claire Fox talked about it. I really want to watch it now.
I'm still getting over the end of it. I just
Don't tell us.
Don't wait.
No,
Don't
not
spoil
what,
it.
not what happened in the ending, but the fact that
Okay.
there's none left to watch. Anyway, no, I went to see a really great play last week called The Fifth Step by playwright David Ireland, and it had in it Martin Freeman, who's Watson in Sherlock Holmes with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Is this like the Alcoholics Anonymous fifth step?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And Jack Loudon, who's in Slow Horses.
Okay.
Yeah, he's really good. Anyway, it was written for Jack Loudon, and it's just a brilliant play about. It's set in a kind of Alcoholics Anonymous kind of encounter between a mentor or sponsor, who's the experienced person, sober person, and then this younger chap who wants to stop drinking, and that's Jack Loudon, and. But it's all about the kind of therapeutic approach of the 12 Steps programme of Alcoholics Anonymous versus faith and religion. Wow. And so it's really, really clever. And it's one of those plays where you just need a really good idea. You know, sometimes I come out from films and plays and I just think, there wasn't a single idea that I can come away with and chew on. I only want one. And this one had a great one, which was about the tussle between meaning and belief and faith and whether what it takes to kind of lift you beyond yourself. Because this young guy who's sort of addicted to pornography, and drinking, he just says, I'm lonely. And then as he starts to solve his problems by becoming sober and then finds a woman, the sponsor then kind of has an issue with him because the part of what he also finds is faith. So he has a kind of vision where he then discovers Christianity. And the sponsor, who's a secularist and quite anti-religion, is trying to sort of then really objects to this. So it's a brilliant... there is literally a physical fight at some point, but it's very well done and it's hilarious. And there was proper, very mixed audience of men and women. And you know when you go to some theatre and there's a sort of smug, knowing laughter where people are like, there's a joke about Trump or Brexit, and you just think, oh my God. This was proper hilarious, like kind of bursts of laughter where people are sort of laughing almost despite themselves. Okay. It was really, really, he's very, very funny. He's a great playwright.
And where was this on?
Soho Place in London.
Okay.
But it was previously at the Edinburgh Festival. I don't know whether it will go anywhere else, it might do.
Yeah.
He did a big one called Ulster American last year that had Woody Harrelson in it, and that did extremely well. But I would really recommend, if you see anything by David Ireland, go and see it, because he's just a very free playwright who just gives you a few ideas to chew on and also is very, very funny and very human. He's just great.
We'll definitely put a link to that in the show notes.
It might be sold out, unfortunately.
Okay.
But it might come up somewhere else.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. Anything else you need to say, Sebastian? You've already done your Culture Club item this week, didn't you?
I've got another one, but I know we're short on time.
I think we're probably a bit short on time, maybe next week.
I'll save it.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you, everybody, for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, please do share, like, and follow the show, and we will see you again next week.
Thanks for listening, and thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.